Helm is king of Rohan. Rich and powerful guy, Freka, wanted Helm to marry off his daughter to Freka's son, Wolf. They had words. Helm ended up dealing Freka such a blow, single blow, that he died shortly after. There's no weapons, just his hand. Hello, everybody. Welcome to There and Back Again, where we are walking our way through Tolkien's Legendarium, looking for new insights and a greater understanding of the works we all love. Today, we're continuing through the 7th chapter of Book 3, Helm's Deep, or Chapter 7. As we get started, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, grab a version of the books you don't have in the description below if you'd like to support the channel that way. We also have a couple great deals for you in the description. You can get 15% off artisanal tea and coffee from Chapters Tea and Coffee, and also get the friends and family discount when you refinance or purchase a new home with Rocket Mortgage. Links again in the description. All right, let's dive in. The sun was already westering as they rode from Edoras, and the light of it was in their eyes, turning all the rolling fields of Rohan to a golden haze. There was a beaten way northwestward along the foothills of the White Mountains, and this way they followed, up and down in a green country, crossing small, swift streams by many fords. Far ahead and to the right, the misty mountains loomed. Ever darker and taller they grew as the miles went by. The sun went slowly down before them. Evening came behind. I love the beginning of this chapter. It's a good kind of establishing shot, as it were. It's evening. From Edoras, they're angling northwest on their way to the Fords of Isen. It's currently March 2nd. On February 25th was the first battle of the Fords of Isen, and March 2nd was the second battle. Now, they don't know, obviously, that there's a second battle yet, but they're riding out to help and fight Saruman. And I love how at the end of the paragraph, Tolkien gives the evening and action. Evening came behind. Now, I'm sure there are instances of sentences like that being used in a positive way in Tolkien's writing, but the short ones like this, they always feel so menacing. And I'm sure he means it that way too. Probably the most well-known and terrifying of the usages, anyway, of the sentence is in the Silmarillion. Fingolfin decides it's time for him to face Morgoth. Thus he came alone to Angban's gates, and he sounded his horn and smote once more upon the brazen doors and challenged Morgoth to come forth to single combat. And Morgoth came. And that fight was the end of Fingolfin. But the dread that the short statement provides is unmatched but well used here. Evening, it's not just falling. It's not something that's happening like to evening. It's moving on its own, own accord. Evening is coming. Evening is doing something. It's crazy. Now we have this establishing shot where we are, where we're going. Now we're working to create the urgency. The host rode on. Need drove them. Fearing to come too late, they rode with all the speed they could, pausing seldom. Swift and enduring were the steeds of Rohan, but there were many leagues to go. 40 leagues and more it was as the bird flies from Edoras to the fords of the Isen, where they hoped to find the king's men that held back the hosts of Saruman. They're in a hurry. They're trying to keep more of their fellow Rohirrim from dying needlessly. But we have to remember as we're reading, especially if you saw the movies first, they're not riding to hide and protect themselves. They're riding to go fight and protect their countrymen. It's a whole different prospect here. Now, it's the next day and the company is on its way after, sleeping. And away in the northwest, there seemed to be another darkness brooding about the feet of the misty mountains, a shadow that crept down slowly from the wizard's veil. Gandalf dropped back to where Legolas rode beside Eomer. You have the keen eyes of your fair kindred, Legolas, he said, and they can tell a sparrow from a finch a league off. Tell me, can you see anything away yonder towards Isengard? Many miles lie between, said Legolas, gazing thither and shading his eyes with his long hand. I can see a darkness. There are shapes moving in it. Great shapes far away upon the bank of the river. But what they are, I cannot tell. It is not mist or cloud that defeats my eyes. There is a veiling shadow that some power lays upon the land, and it marches slowly downstream. It is as if twilight under endless trees were flowing downwards from the hills. And behind us comes a very storm of Mordor, said Gandalf. It will be a black night. What starts this whole conversation is Gandalf seeing another darkness. This is darkness another than the haziness that's kind of coming behind them with the sun, the darkness from Mordor. This is a different darkness Gandalf sees around where Isengard is. What is this darkness? So again, it's March 3rd now. Appendix B tells us the Ents reach Isengard on the night of the 2nd. Hammond and Skull let us know that Tolkien wrote in what they call the scheme that Gandalf was seeing the shadow of the Huorns over Isengard. The scheme is the latest and only complete manuscript timeline for The Lord of the Rings, and we see this play out in Legolas' response. There are shapes moving in the darkness. It's marching down the stream. And kind of remembering forward, the Huorns will show up later that night, or the next morning, I guess, So they're working their way south from Isengard to Helm's Deep as they speak. Now, Gandalf does make a point to note it's going to be a Black Night, and we'll see that to be true in more than one way. But even though he says it's the very storm of Mordor, we're not going to get the dawnless day where there's so much smoke from Mount Doom that, seems like night all the time for another about a week. And I don't fully know what he means here then by saying that, unless it's just the battle and that's bad. My best guess, really, beginning of the smoke that comes from Mount Doom, but it just takes time for it to like fully saturate the sky and like really keep everything dark. But, still not exactly a great omen. As they continue their journey, a rider comes to them from the first battle of the Fords of Isen. Once Theodred fell, things have, gone badly. We were overmastered. The shield wall was broken. Erkenbrand of Westfold has drawn off those men he could gather towards his fastness in Helm's Deep. The rest are scattered. Where is Eomer? Tell him there is no hope ahead. He should return to Edoras before the wolves of Isengard come there. Theoden had sat silent, hidden from the man's sight behind his guards. Now he urged his horse forward. Come, stand before me, Ceorl, he said. I am here. The last host of the Eorlingas has ridden forth. I will not return without battle. The man's face lightened with joy and wonder. He drew himself up, then he knelt, offering his notched sword to the king. Command me, lord, he cried, and pardon me. You thought I remained in Meduseld, bent like an old tree under winter snow. So it was when you rode to war. But a west wind has shaken the boughs, said Theoden. Give this man a fresh horse. Let us ride to the help of Erkenbrand. This is where we learned what has transpired since the first battle of the Fords of Isen. More orcs came and broke the defenses, and the Rohirrim are basically scattered. We learn Erkenbrand was leading them. The rider tells them just go back before the wolves and orcs get to Edoras and completely destroy everything there. No sense dying out in the open with nothing to defend and like no defensible position, right? But then we get Theoden moving from behind his guards. Now, I initially thought he knew the rider's name, but Hammond and Skull to the rescue, they tell me otherwise. Ceorl is an old English word basically meaning like a freeman, countryman, husbandman, that kind of thing. Basically the lowest guy in society. I didn't realize that until I double checked with Hammond and Skull. So love them. Anyway, of course, they're not leaving. Notice he says this is the last host of the Eorlingas. It seems to me like he expects the next battle or battles to go poorly. They're overmatched and they know it. But it doesn't matter. They're going to go. They're going to fight for their land and they're going to fight for their people. Now, that's noble and everything, but the description of the rider when he sees Theoden warms my heart. This is a man who essentially, he's running from destruction to warn others of their imminent destruction. But amidst all of that, the man has joy and looks on his king in wonder. He's astonished to see his sick king, the king who refused to let Eomer ride out against the roving band of orcs, the king he loves, riding out against the forces that just destroyed the men that he fought with. He immediately kneels in service. And that's right after hearing the host in front of him is the last host of the Eorlingas. He knows they're going to go with the expectation to die. And in the final word from Theoden, we hear what they're going to do now. Plans just changed. They were initially going to help the Rohirrim at the Fords of Isen, but since the rider just said Erkenbrand is taking men back to Helm's Deep, Theoden decides to ride there to help them. Obviously, they would be pursued by orcs, so let's, give them some assistance. Gandalf, though, has other things on his mind. While Theoden was speaking, Gandalf rode a short way ahead, and he sat there alone, gazing north to Isengard and west to the setting sun. Now he came back. Ride, Theoden, he said, ride to Helm's Deep. Go not to the Fords of Isen and do not tarry in the plain. I must leave you for a while. Shadowfax must bear me now on a swift errand. Turning to Aragorn and Eomer and the men of the king's household, he cried, Keep well the Lord of the Mark till I return. Await me at Helm's Gate. Farewell. He spoke a word to Shadowfax, and like an arrow from the bow, the great horse sprang away. Even as they looked, he was gone. A flash of silver in the sunset, a wind over the grass, a shadow that fled and passed from sight. Snowmane snorted and reared, eager to follow, but only a swift bird on the wing could have overtaken him. Now, I'm assuming this action from Gandalf was first put into motion by the other shadow he saw over Isengard and Legolas's explanation. I'm assuming, again, he was able to use some of his Maya power to see better, or possibly he just had a minute or two to kind of go through the information he had and think it through. Maybe he knew Horns kind of like brought a shadow or mist with them like before this. And if we remember back to chapter 5, when the hunters meet Gandalf on the eaves of Fangorn, Gandalf says Merry and Pippin's coming to Fangorn was like the falling of small stones that starts an avalanche. So I think it's pretty safe to say he figured out what was happening and who was at Isengard. And although we know he collects Erkenbrand and other men, again, remembering forward, I don't really have an idea about how he pulled them all together or how he knew to go and pull them together. Like maybe when a shield wall breaks, it's nothing like an ordinary retreat. Like they're all spread. I don't really know. Let me know kind of what you think about that. If you have knowledge on this, I'd love to know. How did Gandalf know to gather Erkenbrand and his men, or, that they hadn't reached Helm's Deep or maybe weren't going like totally that direction? So Theoden and the last host of the Eorlingas turn away from the Fords of Isen. The host turned away now from the road to the Fords of Isen and bent their course southward. Night fell, and still they rode on. The hills drew near, but the tall peaks of Three Heron were already dim against the darkening sky. Still some miles away on the far side of the Westfold Vale, a great bay in the mountains lay, a green combe, out of which a gorge opened in the hills. Men of that land called it Helm's Deep, after a hero of old wars who had made his refuge there. Even steeper and narrower it wound inward from the north under the shadow of the Three Heron, till the crow-haunted cliffs rose like mighty towers on each side, shutting out the light. So they were heading north along kind of the westward White Mountains and turned south then to go to Helm's Deep. I guess now is good as any time to talk about Helm. So who was he? The bulk of this narrative can be found in Appendix A with bits taken from Unfinished Tales. And I say bulk even though there's not that much to it. To fully understand his story, there's a little backstory to understand. I won't get into all the dates here, maybe another video, I don't know, let me know. But when Eorl rode down to help Gondor against the Balcoth, after they beat them back, Eorl and the Eorlingas were given the land of Kelenarthon to dwell so they could go help Gondor when Gondor needed it. The not great part about this is that just west through what is now the Gap of Rohan is Dunland. The Dunlendings were kind of spread out a bit and the land was pretty much given away right out from under them. So there's lingering enmity there of the Dunlendings against the Rohirrim, and then Dunlendings are viewed as lesser men by the Rohirrim. So fast forward a couple hundred years, Helm is king of Rohan. Rich and powerful guy, Freka, who allegedly had Dunlending blood in him, came when Helm called for a war council, but wanted Helm to marry off his daughter to Freka's son, Wolf. Now, it should be noted that Freka claimed to be a descendant of the Rohan king from 4 generations ago. Helm made fun of Freka for being fat and he got pretty angry. They finished the council and Helm took Freka outside to talk about not marrying off his daughter to Wolf. They had words. Helm ended up dealing Freka such a blow, single blow, that he died shortly after. There's no weapons, just his hand. So a few years later, Rohirrim were assaulted on various fronts and they basically lost them all. Helm took the Eorlingas to Helm's Deep, took refuge there. Now, here's where it gets super crazy. The long winter started and there was snow from November to March. That's a lot, at least, for me. Now, I'll let Tolkien tell this part. Both the Rohirrim and their foes suffered grievously in the cold and in the dearth that lasted longer. In Helm's Deep, there was a great hunger after Yule, and being in despair against the king's counsel, Hama, his younger son, led men out on a sortie and foray, but they were lost in the snow. Helm grew fierce and gaunt for famine and grief, and the dread of him alone was worth many men in the defense of the burg. He would go out by himself, clad in white, and stalk like a snow troll into the camps of his enemies, and slay many men with his hands. It was believed that if he bore no weapon would bite on him. The Dunlendings said that if he could find no food, he ate men. That tale lasted long in Dunland. Helm had a great horn, and soon it was marked that before he sallied forth, he would blow a blast upon it that echoed in the deep. And then so great a fear fell on his enemies that instead of gathering to take him or kill him, they fled away down the combe. One night, men heard the horn blowing, but Helm did not return. In the morning, there came a sun gleam, the first for long days, and they saw a white figure standing still on the dike, alone, for none of the Dunlendings dared come near. There stood Helm, dead as a stone, but his knees were unbent. Yet men said that the horn was still heard at times in the deep, and the Wraith of Helm would walk among the foes of Rohan and kill men with fear. After this, his sister's son, Freylaf, left Dunharrow, went to Edoras, killed Wolf, and reclaimed the throne of Rohan. That's how the second line of kings started, as Helm's sons died in the winter. So that's who Helm was. He one-punched a guy. And then he was so brazen, he would blow his horn to warn enemies he was coming for them. And then he wouldn't even need to take a weapon with him. He still slew many. And instead of getting himself killed by another warrior, he just froze, standing tall. Still such a fearsome figure that no Dunlending would approach for fear of him. And then his Wraith would then kill Dunlendings with that fear. So talk about a legacy. This guy had one. And his stronghold is where Theoden is going, where Helm held out and sallied forth to strike fear in the attacking Dunlendings. And it would do well to keep this in mind. In the upcoming battle, we'll see a couple instances where the legend of Helm possibly helped out a little bit. But that's something you wouldn't know like the first time you read, because most people don't start with the appendices. And while we're at it, let's get a quick description of Helm's Deep. I'll put a picture up from Karen Wynne Fonstad's Atlas of Middle-earth. It's not technically official, but for the most part, people consider it good, and this is how Tolkien described it. At Helm's Gate, before the mouth of the deep, there was a heel of rock thrust outward by the northern cliff. There upon its spur stood high walls of ancient stones, and within them was a lofty tower. The Hornburg it was called, for a trumpet sounded upon the tower, echoed in the deep behind, as if armies long forgotten were issuing to war from caves beneath the hills. A wall, too, the men of old had made from the Hornburg to the southern cliff, barring the entrance to the gorge. Beneath it, by a wide culvert, the deeping stream passed out. About the feet of the Hornrock it wound and flowed then in a gully through the midst of a wide green gore, sloping gently down from Helm's Gate to Helm's Dyke. Thence it fell into the deeping combe and out into the Westfold Vale. There in the Hornburg at Helm's Gate, Erkenbrand, master of Westfold on the borders of the Mark, now dwelt. As the days darkened, with threat of war, being wise, he had repaired the wall and made the fastness strong. So there's a bit of an explanation there. Helm's Deep itself is like the canyon that goes back into the mountains. Outside the gate is Helm's Dyke, mostly kind of a short wall, runs a wide semicircle around the gate. At the gate proper is some rock jutting out where the Hornburg is built. There's a big causeway running up to it, basically the road. Past that door and you get to the outer court, then there's the inner court, and then the Hornburg, the tower proper. South from the outer court, the wall runs to the other side of the canyon. And if my stellar description is not enough, go back, pause for a minute on the picture, Karen Wynne Fonstad. That's really good. And pick up Atlas of Middle-earth, linked in the description. It's amazing. So they arrived at Helm's Deep at night. Scouts come across wolf riders who probably suck a lot. The people from the area have seen Gandalf riding hither and thither. I can only assume he was talking with people and trying to find Erkenbrand and the other men. Now, as they're approaching Helm's Deep, it starts to get really dicey. The rumor of war grew behind them. Now they could hear, borne over the dark, the sound of harsh singing. They had climbed far up into the deeping combe when they looked back. Then they saw torches, countless points of fiery light upon the black fields behind, scattered like red flowers, or winding up from the lowlands in long flickering lines. Here and there a larger blaze went up. So the orcs and the army of Isengard are coming behind them. The blazes they're seeing flare up, they're going to be houses or barns of people like live in the area. So if we stop to think about that for a minute, this is not simply an invading army trying to get to the capital of a country and conquer the throne. This army is going through wantonly killing, wantonly burning. Hopefully the innocent people left already, but some of them probably got run down by wolf riders and the orcs who can, move rather quickly. Aragorn makes a comment that I want to touch on for just a second. Would that day was here and we might ride down upon them like a storm out of the mountains, said Aragorn. It grieves me to fly before them. Tolkien does this so well pretty much all the time. This is such a simple thing. Aragorn hates running from orcs and wants to charge them, but it's night so you can't do it effectively. Okay, cool. That sounds really self-explanatory. But when you read about young Aragorn's exploits and how he rode with Theoden's father, it takes on a little bit of a different meaning. Like, he probably isn't just a good fighter on foot with his sword. If he was good enough to be welcomed into the Eorad to be known by King Thengel, he must have been an absolutely amazing warrior, even on a horse. It's just another little layer, another thing that if you're a careful reader of the appendices, you'll catch next time you read the book. Now they finally reach Helm's Deep. The host passed through the breach and halted on the sloping sward above. They now learned to their joy that Erkenbrand had left many men to hold Helm's Gate, and more had since escaped thither. Maybe we have 1,000 to fight on foot, said Gamling, an old man, the leader of those that watched the dike. But most of them have seen too many winters, as have I, or too few as my son's son here. What news of Erkenbrand? Word came yesterday that he was retreating hither with all that is left of the best riders of Westfold, but he's not come. I fear that he will not come now, said Eomer. Our scouts have gained no news of him, and the enemy fills all the valley behind us. I would that he had escaped, said Theoden. He was a mighty man. In him lived again the valor of Helm the Hammerhand. But we cannot await him here. We must draw all our forces now behind the walls. Are you well stored? We bring little provision, for we rode forth to open battle, not to siege. Happily, they learned Erkenbrand was a smart man, left a small contingent of men to hold the fortress. And I mean, no use having a great place to fall back if it just like gets sacked before you even get there. So when you're facing an existential threat, you're not going to leave your best and brightest necessarily. So of course, it's the young guys and the old guys who stayed. While not the best, it's the best option. And when you have a well-fortified position, you can do a lot with a little. And of course, any hope that comes has to be dashed immediately. While Gambling is happy they arrived and, has heard Erkenbrand is on his way back with the survivors of the Fords of the Icing battles, Éomer shoots that down real quick. But what Theoden says is great. Erkenbrand has the valor of Helm Hammerhand, so it's really no surprise he survived the other battles. And then when he arrives after marching through the night, we shouldn't be too surprised either. We'll finish up their arrival scene as our last text for today. Behind us in the caves of the deep are 3 parts of the folk of Westfold, old and young, children and women, said Gambling. But great store of food and many beasts and their fodder have also been gathered here. That is well, said Éomer. They are burning or despoiling all that is left in the Vale. If they come to bargain for our goods at Helm's Gate, they will pay a high price, said Gambling. So even though Theoden's riders didn't come prepared for a siege, Helm's Deep has a bunch of food far back in the valley and the caves even further in. We're getting a little extra stress and encouragement for those defending. Women and children, old, are hidden back there. These people aren't just fighting an invading force. They're here to save their wives and children, their sons and daughters, their mothers and fathers from an enemy force that is there only to kill and destroy. People have hated them for generations and orcs bred to be cruel. That's this army. Gambling's last statement here rings louder taken in that context. They will pay a high price. The men of Rohan will die fighting before letting anyone happen to those in the caverns. And as much of a cliffhanger as that may or may not be, that is where we will be stopping for today. So thank you all so much for watching. Please don't forget, like and subscribe, buy a new version of the book you don't already have in the description. Don't forget, claim your 50% off chapters, tea, and coffee, or your friends and family discount on closing costs with Rocket Mortgage. And until next time, always remember, out into the light, they shall come again.